Wife of 18 years secretly became a surrogate for her sister. Husband got revenge. Cheating story. I never thought I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 52 years old, signing divorce papers to end my 18-year marriage. But when your wife decides to have another man's baby without telling you, even if that baby is for her sister, some lines just can't be uncrossed. My name is Michael Donovan. For nearly 2 decades, I built a life with my wife Rebecca in our comfortable suburban home outside of Portland. I worked my way up to senior architect at a respected firm while Rebecca taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. We had 2 daughters, Lily, now 17, and Emma, 15. And what I thought was a solid marriage built on honesty and trust. How naive I was to think that after so many years together, I truly knew the woman sleeping beside me every night. It started last December when Rebecca began acting strangely. She was constantly tired, emotional, and spent an unusual amount of time on the phone with her sister Claire. I didn't think much of it initially. Rebecca and Claire had always been close, and Claire had been struggling with infertility for years. I figured Rebecca was just being supportive during another round of failed treatments. Then came the physical changes. Rebecca started wearing looser clothing, avoided intimacy, and made excuses to skip our traditional Friday night dinners with friends. When I suggested we plan our summer vacation to celebrate our upcoming anniversary, she was oddly non-committal, saying we should wait and see how things look in a few months. By February, I knew something was seriously wrong. Rebecca would disappear for hours, claiming she was running errands, then return with nothing to show for it. She set a password on her phone for the first time in our marriage. When I questioned her about these changes, she became defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. One evening in early March, I came home early from work to find Rebecca asleep on the couch, her shirt riding up enough to reveal an unmistakable baby bump. My blood ran cold as I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Rebecca was 46. We had completed our family years ago and had taken permanent measures to prevent any surprises. Yet there she was, clearly pregnant. I gently woke her, my hand trembling as I touched her shoulder. "Rebecca," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to explain what's going on right now." She blinked awake, confusion giving way to alarm as she realized her stomach was exposed. She quickly pulled her shirt down and sat up, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. "Michael, I was going to tell you," she began, her voice shaking. "I just needed to find the right time." "The right time?" I repeated incredulously. "You're pregnant, Rebecca. How is that even possible? When exactly would the right time have been to tell me this?" Tears filled her eyes as she began her explanation. Her sister Claire and brother-in-law Mark had been trying for a baby for over a decade. After multiple miscarriages and failed IVF attempts, they had asked Rebecca to be their surrogate. According to Rebecca, she had agreed out of love for her sister, planning to surprise me with the news once the first trimester was safely behind them. "I didn't want to burden you with the decision," she claimed. "I knew you'd worry about my age, about the risks, about what people would think, but Claire deserves to be a mother, and I could give her that gift. So you decided to become pregnant with another man's child, your brother-in-law's child, without even discussing it with your husband?" I was struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've been lying to me for months while growing his baby inside you?" "It's not like that," Rebecca insisted. "It's Claire and Mark's baby. I'm just carrying it for them. The egg wasn't even mine, it was a donor egg. I'm not related to the baby at all." That statement just made everything worse. Not only had she decided to become pregnant without consulting me, but she had undergone significant medical procedures in secret, hormonal treatments, embryo transfers, regular doctor visits, all while lying to my face day after day. "How could you make such a life-altering decision without me?" I asked, the hurt and betrayal settling into my bones. "Did our marriage vows mean so little to you that you could cut me out of something this monumental?" "I knew you wouldn't approve," she admitted quietly. "And I couldn't say no to Claire. Not when I could finally give her what she's wanted her whole life." In that moment I realized that my wife had valued her sister's happiness above our marriage, above our trust, above everything we had built together for nearly 2 decades. I slept in the guest room that night, too angry and confused to be near Rebecca. By morning, my shock had hardened into determination. I contacted a lawyer and began quietly documenting everything. While Rebecca had technically not been unfaithful in the traditional sense, her deception felt just as devastating as if she had been having an affair. When I confronted Rebecca with divorce papers 2 weeks later, she was stunned. She had genuinely believed that once the initial shock wore off, I would forgive her and embrace her selfless act of love for her sister. She couldn't comprehend that regardless of her intentions, the deliberate deception had broken something essential in our marriage. "You're really choosing to end 18 years of marriage over this?" she asked incredulously. "I'm not having an affair, Michael. This isn't another man's baby that I'm keeping. It's a gift for my sister." "This isn't about the surrogacy," I explained, surprisingly calm. "If you had come to me, if we had discussed this together as partners, I might have supported your decision. This is about the months of lies, the secret medical procedures, the complete disregard for me as your husband. You cut me out of a life-changing decision and expected me to just accept it once it was too late to have any input." Rebecca's face crumpled as the reality of the situation finally hit her. "What about the girls? What will we tell them?" "The truth," I said firmly, "that their mother made a major life decision that affected our entire family without consulting me, and I couldn't stay in a marriage without trust." The next few weeks were a blur of painful conversations and logistics. I moved into an apartment near my office, while Rebecca stayed in our home. We sat down with Lily and Emma together to explain the situation as clearly and objectively as possible, though there's no good way to tell your teenage daughters that their family is falling apart. Their reactions were as different as their personalities. Lily, our serious, analytical firstborn, peppered us with practical questions about living arrangements and college plans, her emotions locked tightly away. Emma, always more expressive, alternated between tears and anger, at one point shouting that we were ruining everything because we couldn't work through one mistake. "It wasn't one mistake," I gently explained to Emma. "It was hundreds of daily choices to lie, to hide things, to exclude me from something that affects our whole family." What I didn't tell them was how humiliated I felt. How I couldn't face our friends and neighbors, knowing they would soon see my pregnant wife and wonder about our private life. How colleagues had already begun giving me strange looks when they spotted Rebecca's growing belly during a chance encounter at the grocery store. How the thought of her carrying Mark's child, brother-in-law or not, made me physically ill. Word spread quickly in our close-knit community. Some friends took sides, others awkwardly tried to remain neutral. Rebecca's family predictably rallied around her, with Claire leading the charge in painting me as the villain who couldn't support a beautiful act of sisterly love. My own parents, in their 70s and traditional to their core, were horrified by Rebecca's actions and fully supported my decision to end the marriage. But the real tipping point came when Mark approached me at a local coffee shop one rainy April morning. I was sitting alone, reviewing architectural plans for a new project, when he slid into the seat across from me unannounced. "We need to talk, Michael," he said, his expression a mixture of guilt and determination. I looked up, surprised to see him. Mark and I had always gotten along well enough at family gatherings, but we had never been close. Now, with the situation as it was, I had been avoiding him entirely. "I'm not sure we have anything to discuss," I replied coldly, gathering my papers. "Please," he said, reaching out as if to stop me from leaving. "There's something you need to know. Something that might change how you see things." Against my better judgment, I remained seated, waiting silently for him to continue. "The baby Rebecca is carrying," he began hesitantly, "it's not just a donor egg and my contribution. The egg is Claire's." I stared at him, confused. "That's not possible. Claire can't produce viable eggs. That's why you've been trying surrogacy with donors." Mark looked down at his hands. "We did another round of treatments last year. They were able to retrieve 3 viable eggs from Claire. We had them fertilized and frozen." "And you didn't think to mention this during this whole surrogacy discussion?" I asked, my anger rising again. "That's just it," Mark said, meeting my eyes. "There was no discussion with us either, not really. Rebecca approached Claire about being a surrogate, not the other way around." The coffee shop seemed to fade around me as I processed his words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Rebecca volunteered. She persuaded Claire, who was hesitant about asking her sister at 46 to carry a baby. Rebecca assured her that you were fully on board, that you both had discussed it thoroughly and felt it was an amazing opportunity to help us complete our family." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only had Rebecca lied to me, but she had fabricated an entire narrative to present to her sister and brother-in-law. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Claire and I have been arguing about it for weeks. She didn't want to betray Rebecca's confidence, but I felt you deserved to know the whole truth, especially after seeing what this has done to you." After Mark left, I sat in that coffee shop for hours, replaying every conversation, every lie, every moment of the past several months. The betrayal felt even deeper now, knowing that Rebecca had actively pursued this path, rather than reluctantly agreeing to help her desperate sister. That night, I wrote a detailed email to both our families, our closest friends, and several mutual colleagues explaining exactly what had happened, including the revelations from Mark. I outlined how Rebecca had volunteered to be a surrogate without consulting me, how she had lied not only to me but to Claire and Mark about my knowledge and approval, and how she had hidden her pregnancy for months through deliberate deception. "I'm not sharing this to be vindictive," I wrote in conclusion, "but to clarify the circumstances of our separation. Rebecca has portrayed this as a simple disagreement about her choice to help her sister. In reality, it represents a fundamental breach of trust and a pattern of deception that has made our marriage untenable. I ask for your understanding and respect as we navigate this difficult transition." I hesitated only briefly before hitting send. Perhaps it was petty, perhaps it was unnecessary, but after months of feeling powerless and humiliated, I needed to reclaim my narrative and set the record straight. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Rebecca's phone apparently began ringing off the hook within minutes of my email going out. Friends who had been keeping their distance reached out to express their support and shock. Even Claire called me, tearfully apologizing for her role in the situation, admitting that she had been so focused on finally having a child that she had overlooked the red flags in Rebecca's story. Rebecca showed up at my apartment the next morning, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her pregnant belly now impossible to ignore at 5 months along. "How could you?" she demanded when I opened the door. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone we know." "I told the truth," I replied simply. "Something you might consider trying." "I made a mistake," she acknowledged, her voice breaking. "A terrible mistake. But did you have to destroy my reputation? My relationship with my sister?" "You did that yourself," I pointed out. "With every lie you told, every truth you concealed. I simply made sure everyone had the facts." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, one hand resting on her swollen abdomen. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Rebecca had always struggled with being in her more successful sister's shadow. Claire had the more prestigious career, the larger house, the more charming husband. According to Rebecca's perception at least, the one thing Rebecca had that Claire desperately wanted was children. Perhaps this surrogacy had been her way of finally having something Claire needed, of being the sister with the power to give rather than the one who always felt second best. But understanding her motivation didn't erase the damage she had done. The trust between us was shattered beyond repair. "What happens now?" she asked finally, wiping her tears. "The divorce moves forward," I said firmly. "I've asked my lawyer to be fair in the settlement. We'll split assets equally, share custody of the girls, keep things as amicable as possible for their sake. But our marriage is over, Rebecca." In the following months, Rebecca delivered a healthy baby boy for Claire and Mark. I didn't attend the birth or the subsequent celebration, though both my daughters did. According to Lily, the atmosphere was strained, with the joy of the new baby tempered by the obvious tension between the sisters. Claire had forgiven Rebecca for her deception, but their relationship had fundamentally changed. As for me, the divorce was finalized 6 months after Rebecca's delivery. True to my word, I kept things fair and focused on minimizing the impact on our daughters. Lily was preparing for college by then, while Emma continued to split her time between our two households, gradually adjusting to our new normal. The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't in punishing Rebecca or turning people against her. It was in refusing to accept her lies, in standing up for the truth, and in valuing myself enough to walk away from a relationship that no longer honored my dignity or trust. A year after our separation, I ran into Rebecca at Emma's school play. She looked older, more subdued, her confidence dimmed by the consequences of her choices. We exchanged polite greetings before finding seats on opposite sides of the auditorium. "Dad," Emma had asked me on the drive home that night, "do you ever think you and Mom might get back together? She's really sorry, you know." "I know she is, sweetheart," I replied gently, "and I've forgiven her, for my own peace of mind as much as anything else. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to a situation that wasn't healthy. Your mother and I are better apart now." Emma was quiet for a moment before asking, "Was it worth it? Ending things over one mistake, even if it was a big one?" I considered my answer carefully, wanting to be honest without demonizing her mother. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a choice that revealed fundamental problems in how we viewed our marriage and each other. And yes, having the self-respect to say this isn't acceptable to me was worth it, even though it's been painful for everyone. 2 years after the divorce, I received a text from Rebecca asking if we could meet for coffee. Curious, and no longer carrying the raw anger of before, I agreed. We met at a neutral location, both slightly awkward but civil. "I've been in therapy," she began without preamble. "A lot of therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. I convinced myself it was all about helping Claire, but the therapist helped me see that it was more complicated than that. She twisted her napkin nervously. "I was jealous of her my whole life, and this was a way to finally have power in our relationship, to be the one giving something instead of always feeling less than. But it was also about us, about feeling like I was losing your attention, like we were growing apart. Instead of addressing that directly, I created this dramatic situation that forced you to focus on me." "That's quite an insight," I acknowledged, surprised by her self-awareness. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now how deeply I betrayed your trust, and I'm truly sorry, not just for getting caught or for the consequences, but for the pain I caused you." She paused, meeting my eyes. "You deserved better." "We all did," I replied quietly, "but I appreciate the apology." As we parted ways, I reflected on the journey of the past few years. Rebecca's deception had ended our marriage, but it had also freed me from a relationship that had clearly been broken beneath the surface. In the aftermath, I had rebuilt my life on more authentic foundations. I had grown closer to my daughters through honest conversations about integrity and self-respect. I had even begun dating again, cautiously exploring the possibility of a relationship based on genuine trust. Some might view my response to Rebecca's betrayal as excessive. Why end an 18-year marriage over a temporary situation, even one as significant as a secret surrogacy? But standing in the sunshine outside that coffee shop, watching my ex-wife walk away, I felt certain that I had made the right choice. The greatest revenge against deception isn't more deception, or punishment or public humiliation, though I had certainly indulged in the latter. The greatest revenge is living truthfully, refusing to compromise your dignity, and having the courage to walk away from situations that no longer serve your highest good. Rebecca had chosen her path, with all its complex motivations and painful consequences, and I had chosen mine, a path of difficult truth over comfortable lies, of self-respect over hollow compromise. In the end, that choice had freed us both.